So Sao Paulo, the city itself, is huge. I mean, the geographical boundaries have 12 million people. The metropolitan area, including a couple other cities that are basically all one big city, are 20 million people. And it's huge. There are people everywhere in the center of Sao Paulo. And there are actually 5 missions in the city of Sao Paulo that break up the city. And then in the state of Sao Paulo, there are another 4 for a total of 9. And Sao Paulo North is really special because it was actually the first mission in Brazil. It's the one that eventually got split up into tons of the 34 that are there in Brazil now. So we celebrated, while I was in my mission, we celebrated our 80th anniversary as a mission. It's a long time. So the work has been going on there for a long time, especially in Sao Paulo. And there are really old families there that you would meet, and they show up and say, yeah, my family's been members of the church since whatever year, 80 years ago, 60 years ago. You're like, wow, that's crazy. My family hasn't even been in that church that long. And it was just fun to meet all those people. Very religious. Lots of them are either Catholic or evangelicals, and lots of them are very devout followers. You will find lots of people who say they belong to a certain religion, but never go, but most of them are very religious people. The mission itself is about half and half. Half of the mission is really the city, just concentrated people, houses, workplaces, factories, all that stuff. And then you get eventually farther out and you get a lot of the countryside as well. So I got to serve in a little bit of both. Sao Paulo North actually gained a lot of that countryside about 3 years ago. It used to be pretty much just city. And right before I got there, they split the mission and made the West Mission. And where Sao Paulo North used to have the temple in Sao Paulo, in the area offices, they actually just put that in the West Mission, which made it really interesting for us. I served in the mission office for about 4 months, and I mean, our mission president was in a completely different mission. He lived an hour and a half away from us, so it's kind of hard to see him sometimes, but it was really cool to go into the city, see the culture there. Everyone's running around, they're busy, but still very hospitable. The people are very loving, and you walk up to the door, you don't knock, you clap. And you'll go up and clap your hands, and they'll come running out and say, oh, hey, how are you doing? Do you need some water? Have you had dinner yet? Would you like to be fed? And most of the time you decline, but the people are just open and loving and want to meet you a lot of the time. You'll find people who reject you and yell, but a lot of times they're very open people. And you get farther out in the countryside, and people are just slow. They've got their farms a lot of time. There'll be small suburban areas, and it's just fun to see the differences. They take a very different approach to life. Still very hospitable, very loving and caring, but also very calm, laid back. Sao Paulo North especially is a very high baptizing mission. When I was there, we were starting to hit about 300 baptisms a month, and now I've been getting emails and stuff from friends saying they've started to hit around 400 a month. And it's incredible just the rate at which people will come into the church. There is a very common challenge of just keeping people. People have challenges with cigarettes, with drugs a lot of the time. It's hard for them to leave everything they've done. A lot of times their families will be resilient as well and will want them to change churches or anything. But people there have so much faith that they're often very willing. And it's difficult to find those few people who are ready and just willing to go, okay, I'm going to put it all past me and move on and find this new correct path. But they are out there. And Sao Paulo itself is a very special place because there are so many people that you can just talk and talk and talk, and you can find so many people who are ready to hear the gospel. One of the most successful things I found was focusing on families. The people of Sao Paulo are very family oriented. You get a lot of people in Sao Paulo who have moved down from way up in the north of Brazil, And though that culture especially is very family oriented. So you start talking to them and explaining how your family can be together forever, about eternal marriage, and people catch on to that a lot. They want to be with their families. Church itself in Sao Paulo, there are tons of words and stakes. I mean, in a city of, we had a city of 200,000 people, I think, that had 5 or 6 stakes by the time I left. And each one of those stakes would have, on average, 5 or 6 wards that had, on average, 100 people. I mean, sometimes a little less. 50 to 100 people was about the norm for a ward there. And there is a ton of growth. I mean, you have a mission that's not terribly huge. It can take a long time to travel from one side to the other, but the major concentration of people is in the city of Sao Paulo. And with 200 missionaries in an area like that, getting on average 2 baptisms per missionary is a lot of people. And you have a lot of old families that invite new people in. Depending on where you go, you can get a lot of member help, and they just love to share their gospel. There are very much the challenges of finding people still. Talking with everyone you see is definitely the best approach I've come across. Knocking doors was always hard, because as much as people would be hospitable and let you in, they were often busy, and they'd either ask for a different time or say, no, please don't come back. We have our religion and we don't want to hear anything else. That was often tough to hear, as we saw these people that we wanted to help, that we loved. Especially after meeting so many other Brazilians, we just loved the people. And it was hard to see them turn us away a lot of the time. The leadership in the church in Brazil is so strong. Every bishop that I saw, especially every stake president, was just focused. And it's interesting that Brazil, and especially Sao Paulo, all their leaders are very missionary oriented. They want new people. They want to work with the missionaries. They want to feed the missionaries. They want to do activities that'll bring new people into the church. They are very helpful, and they just love doing missionary work. So that's one of the things I found most interesting about the leadership in particular. I served from August of 2013 until July of 2015. And I started out in a suburb of a city just outside of Sao Paulo. The suburb was called Amador Bueno, right outside the city of Itapevi. And I served there for about 3 months, and then I moved on to a city way far away from the capital. I took a 2-hour bus to a city, and then took another probably hour trip out by bus to what was called Itapetininga, which was a city of about 100,000 people. We had 2 areas there and 2 branches. It was really cool. I stayed there for another 3 months before moving to a suburb of Sao Paulo itself. It was called Vila Medeiros. And I stayed there for 4 months before moving on to a suburb of a big city way outside of Sao Paulo, about 2 hours away, the city was called Sorocaba, and I served in Vila Progresso inside of Sorocaba. From there, after 3 months, I think, I moved back into the city of Sao Paulo, went to a different suburb called Tucuruvi, which is where the mission office was. So I was a records and referral secretary for 4 months, and I served in that part of Sao Paulo for a while, that neighborhood. And before moving on to a city just north of Sao Paulo, about 20 minutes away, called Perus. So I served in Perus for about 3 months, and then moved on to my last area, which was called Arçoiaba da Serra, which was another city about a little over 2 2 hours away from Sao Paulo itself. So I moved around quite a bit. I shuffled in between what we called the interior, which was the countryside, and then back into the city of Sao Paulo, and I just kind of flipped back and forth a lot. It was a lot of fun.